Hey there, welcome to the Literary Escapes podcast. I'm Becky, and I'm glad you're here today. If you're a fan of books that give you an escape or let you explore other cultures, then you're definitely in the right place. So I'm glad you've joined us today. Stick around, we've got a great author interview for you, so let's jump right in. So Sue, welcome. We are very excited to have you in our book club this month. Just a little bit about what we do. Every month we visit a different destination in our book club. And so this is our third year together, and we have been all around the world and back again. And because I'm in the US, it's much more fun to go elsewhere than to stick to home, but we have done a few around here. And so this month was Italy, and we're thrilled to have read one of your books. So thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. So have you got an Italian island summer in America yet? I thought it wasn't there yet.
It's not yet, no, because I was going to do that one and then I couldn't find it. And so we wound up reading One Summer in Italy.
Oh, right. Okay. So that's one of the books set in Umbria.
Exactly.
Which, yeah. Sorry, it's for 7 years I went for to a writing retreat there. So the Hotel Casa Felice is that building only expanded a lot.
That's okay.
Hotel sized.
That's really cool. I was going to ask if the Hotel Felice was or Casa Felice was based on something. So that's really cool. Do you tend to do that in most of your books where something is based on something?
Yeah, it is. They are often based on some. I've seen like today I'm writing my book that I'm in France to research my book for summer 2024. That's in the UK. My schedules don't always move together, but I think that one may come out in the US in the same summer. And so I've been sitting in a square deciding which building is going to be the restaurant and what kind of chairs and tables they're going to have outside, whether the owner is a sort of a chic black or a muted colors or, you know, right in your face, jolly colors. And so, yeah, I have taken photographs of the actual building, and I know how much of it her apartment above it encompasses and which is the dining room, etc. So, well, I have an actual map of Quimper, which is the town where I am. You know, they give them out in the hotel, so I've scribbled all over them and put crosses and circles and everything. But if it's a village I create, which the other part of the book will be set on the Isle of Skye in a village that I'm going to create, then the map will be on my website. There's 2 or 3 maps on there already of villages that only exist in my books. So they're there, yeah.
That's fun. So okay, let me start at the beginning. We kind of jumped right in, but so let me back up a little bit. You were an Army child. In the US, we call it Army brats, but you were okay. Yeah. And it looks like you spent a lot of time in really interesting places around Europe, which that's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, I was born in Germany. I was only there for 6 weeks, so I don't have good German.
Remember much.
But I don't remember much. But I can order beer in German because my brother lived there. So white beer, brown beer, big beer, small beer. I've got it all covered. And then I moved to Cyprus for about 20 months. I don't remember that either, unfortunately. But then we went to Malta, back to the UK, back to Malta. So that's the part I remember. So Malta is kind of the home of my heart. Yeah. And my new release in Canada at the moment is Summer on a Sunny Island, which is set in Malta. And the mother, Rosa, is the heroine. And the mother, Dory, I've given her my childhood, really. She went to the same school. She has the same feelings. She's in love with Malta still. She jumps down the throat of anybody who says rude things about the army and like that.
That's fun. So how did you And it doesn't look like you like jumped right into writing. Is that correct?
Well, I never stopped because of interrupted education. When I didn't start school till a little late for the UK, and then when I went to Malta, they just caught me up. They just moved me a year, and nobody had taught me to read and write. And I could write Susan with a back to front end, and that was about it. And I
Wow.
could count money. Somebody had made sure I knew how money worked.
Good
um,
thing.
so I fell behind. So I was six by the time I learned to read. But as soon as I learned to read, that was it. I knew the way to fiction land. I used to tell elaborate lies, which I think were good training. And as soon as I knew that somebody created what went between the pages, I wanted what between the covers, I wanted to be her. And I
Nice.
thought I would be. I didn't get on that well at school. I think I didn't get on that well with teachers because I always thought I ought to be running the show. And it looked kind of hard to be a novelist. And I decided I would be a journalist. So I saw the careers teacher, and he said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to be a journalist." And he said, "Well, you'll need to go to university. You'll need to stay on at school for the next 2 years. That's between 16 and 18. And then go to university for 4 years." So I said, "Well, I'm not doing that then. So what can I
Thanks, but
do
no
that means
thanks.
I can leave school now?" So I went and did a secretarial course. And the very first day at that college, somebody was talking about the local paper. I don't know if you've had the same scheme at all, being a cub reporter, where you train on the job. So you go straight from school and you train being, in the paper. And I found out my local paper did this. And instead of going home and writing to them and saying, "I've only just discovered and I'm really keen, and by next year I will have shorthand and typing, so you won't even have to teach me all those things," I just went home and in a grumpy mood, and you know was in a bad teenage sort of strop. So I stayed in a bank. Then after secretarial school, I went to a bank, which I really enjoyed actually, because I mainly worked with the lending team, which means you had all kinds of stories coming your way all the
Yeah.
time. So and so, the marriage is breaking up, and then you find out they're actually living with a different customer, because it's quite a small town, and
Right.
there are only four banks there, so you had a quarter of the banks with you. So that was really interesting. There were some very sad things as well, and it taught
Mhm.
me that money is a really emotive subject, and I use that quite a lot. And I notice other authors when they gloss over something financial, and I think, well, you couldn't do that because the insurance wouldn't let you do X or whatever, or the bank would never agree to that. So all the finance always makes sense. I've just emailed one of my old friends from the bank to talk about safety deposit boxes just before I came on here, because he'll know, he stayed in the bank longer than I did, and he'll know what was happening there in 2001. So I really
Oh,
do pay
interesting.
attention to research. So I finished with the bank and I became a mother. And we made the decision between us that I would work part-time in the evenings and my husband would work during the day. And so then we wouldn't pay for childcare. So we did that. And something really important, he suffered some ill health, so it reduced my capability to work for about 3 years. But he got over that. He was just too stubborn to die. And so something important happened then. Was I answered an advert for an audio typist. I don't know if you would have the same term for it, but basically somebody who wears a headset like you do and either listens to tape or somebody speaks to them and types it really, really, really quickly,
Right. Yeah.
doing shorthand. So it was with a sports newspaper called Motorcycle News, and which is still around. And so all the minor correspondents from all the sport around the country and abroad in the UK on Sunday evenings would phone in their reports. and several of us would be sitting there taking the reports. And why that was important was it trained me onto computers. First of all, it trained me onto what we used to call IBM then, what we call PC now.
Right.
And then they went on Mac, which is brilliant. And I've never left Mac since. And through someone who left there, I then got another part-time job. I had 3 at one time in a typesetters. So that taught me quite a lot about how magazines lay out there, you know, and how things like Quark work, and what you see is what you get was the big phrase at the time. So that all happened in the 90s. And at the same time, I did a course. It wasn't for a qualification. It was more for personal development. And they said, if you don't earn your fees back by the end of the course, then we will pay them back. Well, that turned out to be a fib. And they went bust. So I never got a certificate, but I had tripled my fees. So I'd started selling short stories to women's magazines. So that was where I started. I sold my first story on April the 1st in 1996. And I thought maybe it was an April Fool.
Yeah, exactly.
But it wasn't. I was paid £65 for that. And so I bought myself a proper chair. You know, I was on a typist chair, you know, that's really small with just a little piece for your back and a little piece for your butt. And you had to sit really like this. So I bought myself a big chair with arms and a headrest. But unfortunately, it had a woolen covering, and it gave me a rash on my behind.
Who'd have thunk?
Even through my jeans. So I had to do that to my children to play Mario Kart or whatever. And I had to have the little typist chair back. Yeah, so I did a lot with magazines for a while. And that experience at Motorcycle News taught me how rude they were about freelancers, how rude the staffers were about freelancers. I won't tell you what they called them, but it wasn't clean. And so I didn't go into magazine work with unrealistic expectations. I knew where my place was in the pecking order, and how many people were trying to do the same thing. So, you know, that was the start of it, really.
Very exciting. And so when did it change from like magazine articles to long stories?
Well, it started with long stories. I wrote 2 novels, which were so bad that they went in a landfill somewhere. And that genuinely is the best place for them. They were terrible. I just wrote down my daydreams. I had 2 hours in the week when both my children were either in school or preschool, and one evening when my husband was out at Camera Club. And that evening, I used to pretend to my children it was later than it was, so I could put them in bed by 7. And I used to actually change their clock in their week. And so I wrote those sort of 5 hours a week. That was Sue time. And they were really bad. And I did have the temerity to send them to publishers, and they came back so fast. I'm sure you could have fingerprinted everything but the front page. And so I thought, that was when I thought maybe I need more education than I had. And so that was when I did that course, and I learned a lot about fiction. And now one of my top tips to people who want to write is to always educate yourself. That doesn't mean going and doing a degree in creative writing if that's not what you want to do. But there are so many conferences, conventions, books, magazines, one-to-one mentorship. You know,
there's so many options.
Yeah, it was a big mistake to think I knew it all. It's been my mistake all my life, really. Yeah, so I had been writing those novels. So all the time I was writing short stories, I was always also writing novels.
So the first couple of novels that were really bad, did it feel good though to get them out of you?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I used to imagine myself, it sounds so sad. I used to imagine myself being interviewed on telly by the really big Saturday night chat show hosts. And what I would say were my literary influences. I didn't even know that you need to be yourself and not say, oh, well, I'm heavily influenced by this person or that person. So yeah, I was so tragically flawed. But the thing is, I
It's
did not
good to
give up.
dream, though.
Yeah, I did not give up. And my husband was very supportive. He could very easily have said, isn't it about time you went back to the bank, when the youngest child was 5? He never did. And I just expanded my career as time allowed, as the children
Yeah.
became older and I had more time. And really, as long as that meant that I was doing his share of the household tasks as well as mine, he was okay with it. And I think actually it's not a bad bargain, really, because
Yeah.
4 of us ate out of his pay packet and he didn't keep much back for himself. So now he's retired and I'm keeping him, and I'm glad.
It's nice to
um
be able
so,
to turn the
yeah,
tables, so to speak.
yeah, and he's glad too. He's taken
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
so yeah, I did magazine serials before I actually got a novel
Ooh,
published. um and then I sold a novel or my then agent did, in 2005. And the end of it wasn't written, so that was quite scary.
that would
uh,
be.
yeah, and I'd had a really, really bad day. One of my computer, we had one computer in the family, and it had broken, and I suspect my younger son had done something to it, because that's what he used to do. But my elder son then said, oh, my essay's on that and I've got to hand it in tomorrow, or that's it, I'm going to be suspended for a week. I
Yikes.
said, why? They've got to give you. Yeah, well, this is my third chance. So I was not
Oops.
impressed with him. I took and it was when a computer was a tower, so I carted it off to the computer shop and just got there before 5. And they said, oh, yeah, give us the file name of the essay and we'll get it off for you and you can put it on a thumb drive. And I said, I don't know what the file
Yeah,
name
what
is.
the heck are you talking about?
And then I found out I'd left my phone at home. So I stormed off to my husband's office and rang home. So I got the wrong son, but he was able to give me the phone number of the correct son. So I was able to call him and get the file name. And just before I put the phone down, and I'm really quite grumpy, he said, oh, by the way, Laura rang. And it was like one of those jokes, like everything else went away. And I said, what did Laura want? And she said, will you ring her straight away? Laura being my agent. So I said,
Ooh,
yeah, okay. So I rang number one son and got I got the
the
file
file
name,
name.
computer shop, and gave it to them and said, I'll be back at 5:30. Then rang my agent and she said what I'd been hoping to hear for so many years. She said, I have an offer for you.
Ah,
And apparently my end of the conversation just went, you're joking. You're joking. You're joking. And then I sort
oh.
of walked out in a dream and my husband went, hey, hang on. Um, so he took me out to dinner that night. I said that novelists don't cook,
I like that.
which I've since found to be untrue.
So I can't use that one.
Well, you can try. Maybe your husband likes cooking or is better at cooking. Um, and then, yeah, so we went out for dinner. My son didn't get suspended from college. And when I came back, number 2 son said, somebody called Marina has been on the phone and she says she's your editor and she'd like to congratulate you. And it was like,
I
oh.
have an editor.
So it was quite, that book owes me nothing. That was the 8th book I wrote. I have been back and
Wow.
sold some of the others. But so I sold that to not Transworld, I wish it was, Transitor, and they published it for 4 years and gave me the rights back.
Nice.
And
Okay.
then I self-published it for years, right up until about 3 years ago. It was just online as an ebook. And at one time I had another book in the top 100 for quite a long time because my then publishers were early adopters of ebooks. And that book was earning about £700 a month for me.
Nice.
And
Nice.
then I rewrote it a couple of years ago for my now publisher, HarperCollins, and they put it out under a different title with a new cover. I didn't change the story. I just got rid of all the rookie rubbish, and it got me a new advance. It earned more than one of my front list titles that year, and it was #1 in, I mean, it was top 20 on Kindle, top 50 Sunday Times,
Dang.
and it
How
was #1
exciting.
in Malta, where it's mainly set, for all of last summer. Every time I went back to Malta, there it was, still at #1.
Oh,
So that book owes me nothing. Never give up. Never
that's
give up.
exciting. So basically you're an overnight success, right?
20 years to be an overnight success. Yeah.
Exactly. That's I love the stories of people, mostly women, but people who don't give up and just keep doing it because this is what I do. I'm a writer. This is what I do. Um and eventually it pays off. And that's so
Yeah.
exciting to hear. I love that.
Yeah.
So
I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone, but I am one of the people who took a long time.
that's okay. That's okay. You learned a lot in the process, I'm guessing. So you grew up traveling around and seeing a lot of stuff, and it sounds like you still enjoy the travel piece. I asked you this earlier when we were off camera, but is there anywhere that you've written about that you haven't visited?
North Ireland, the Republic of Ireland. Last year's no, yeah, no, this book. Sorry, I get so confused because I'm working on 3 books at once.
I would imagine, yeah.
Plus, they're out in different countries at different times. So yeah, so an Italian island summer, which is out in the UK now. The heroine was the best friend of Zia in Under the Italian Sun, which is 3 years old, 2 years old, something like that. So many reviewers and readers said, "Can we have Ursula's story?"
Oh,
I gave her her own story, and she transfers from being a tattoo artist to being a ceramic artist, and it's the story of her fresh start. But what I knew about her was she came from Dublin. So I haven't been to Dublin.
okay.
I did think about it last year, but it looked really rainy there. So I have a friend who's from near Dublin. And so it really is almost all the conversation, all the scenes take place in people's houses. It's only a couple of
Okay.
chapters. So it's like her parents' house, her sister's house, her
Gotcha.
Uncle Jerry's house. And Uncle Jerry is a mischief maker. He's the guy who paints his house blue while his wife's away when she wanted it white and things like so he gets Ursula into trouble as well, really. So yeah, so I wrote about that, and for a couple of short stories, I haven't traveled to Australia to set
Mm.
short stories there, and I did struggle with Christmas in Australia, where you would be running into department stores to get out of the sun rather than running in to get out of the
Out of the
snow.
snow, or yeah. How
Yeah,
interesting, huh?
yeah, that was
Grow.
that was difficult, but I managed.
So, is there a setting that you would like to visit and write about that you haven't done yet?
Oh, hundreds, I guess. Well, loads. I really did want to do Christmas in New York
Mm,
because I've been in that part of America. My brother lived in Stamford, Connecticut for several years in
okay.
two um, tranches, if you like. He worked for Avon Cosmetics. And so I do know New York a little. And I
Yeah,
thought, I've never been to New York in the winter. So I want to.
that would be fun.
And
And New York and
yeah,
Christmas in New York City seems like it would be pretty. Um, there's a lot of beautiful things I think that happen, magical
yeah.
things that happen. It feels like so.
Unfortunately, my editor wasn't quite so keen. Um, I think they had an author at that imprint who'd done it like for
Ah,
4 books or something. So
okay.
saying I can't do Greece at the moment because one of my fellow authors at my imprint is also in the same agency as me, and she writes about Greece. So I've
Dang it.
been discouraged from that.
Well, that's too
Um,
bad.
yeah, it is really. It is really. But yeah, there's loads. I mean, anywhere that's safe and warm, really. I don't want to do backpacking through a war zone. That's not me.
No,
Not
no.
at all.
What about Spain? Have you been there, done that?
No, I suggested it this time because I have a friend who lives, oh, what did she call it? Campo or campus? They're
Okay.
very small villages and they have to have their own water and sewage supply and
Wow.
stuff. I thought, oh, that sounds great. I bet that's really rustic. My editor went, which means please don't do that. That's not a very commercial decision.
Well, if it's set like in a olive grove kind of thing, maybe you
Yes.
can do it, or a vineyard, or I don't know if they
Yeah,
have
yeah.
vineyards in
It's
Spain,
interesting,
but
really. The company has just done a market insight into so many percent, 40%, I think 44% actually read my books. And then some more read in my, books like mine. And
okay.
then the rest read in a more general women's fiction area. And they've just asked this focus group all these questions. And Vineyard scored really low. Isn't that
Really?
amazing?
That is
Yeah.
amazing.
I was disappointed, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
I've written about a vineyard. It was awesome.
I
Um,
I love
but
reading those.
so yeah, so this in a way it's great because my editor's saying is that I've become of a stature sufficiently that they'll do these things for me in an effort to help me keep making a step. So why would you then go, nah, I'm not listening to you.
Yeah.
I'm going to New York and Spain. Because that's not going
That's
to
what I want
make
to do. Yeah.
that's not going to make me popular and make them get behind my books. Another
Yeah.
shiny new author is going to come along who's writing exactly what they want because
Right.
that's the business.
That's the business. Yeah. Well, that's interesting, huh? So, where do you get inspiration for your characters?
Oh, everywhere. They're not usually real in any, it's not like I could say to you, well, I did tell you that I gave my background to Dory. That's
Okay.
about as close as I get. And I felt, well, I'm not going to offend me, am I? Um, and really, I sent myself up. I wasn't being very serious about myself. I slightly exaggerated, and my family thought it was quite funny. Um, I try not to let my voice come across and I try not to let real people's voices intrude because then my imagination keeps coming back to reality and I don't want
Hmm.
that. Um, Sometimes I see a picture or I see a person and there's just like this clunk. I
Yeah.
was in Malta when I was writing An Italian Island Summer, actually. I went to Malta on a writing break. My husband goes to play golf in Portugal once a year. So that's my excuse to take off for Malta on my own and do exactly as I want for 10 days.
Lovely.
And I use it as a writing break. And I was writing this book and I just saw this guy. And it's not like oh, even though you're 30 years younger than me, I think you're hot, so I'm going to put you in a book. It's a much more visceral, just this thing
Yeah.
that's him, that's Alfio. Um, and so just that snapshot in my head. So he has long, curly, dark hair, a bit longer than mine, and he's tall and lanky. Just because I just saw this guy, or I see a woman who has a long plait and walks with her toes slightly turned out, and it just does something. It just falls into
And you
fiction land.
create a background for them, and
Yes, yes, yes. I have a notebook, and I like to scribble when I'm doing characterization, and that's where I start with my hero and heroine. And I'm just seeing a question come up: do I photograph these people? I haven't quite been that that bold yet, but maybe I should. Yeah, just this,
secret.
yeah, just this 30-year-old guy, stranger in shorts and sliders, go up and say, "Excuse me, just
I
a
swear I'm
second."
not creepy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to put you in my book. Um, Sorry, I forgot where I got then. I just love that idea. Yes, so I write by hand. I like to
Oh,
know.
wow.
It's only the characterization and notes I do by hand. Something just blah, 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 comes out down my arm.
Nice.
It's like if I'm doing a crossword, I've got to hold the pen I can't do the crossword without the pen. That doesn't work. So I start off, I want to know their background, because nobody's born on page one. I want to know what they want, what their big conflicts are. And if I can make her conflicts conflict with his conflicts, that's great. And I get to the end and I've painted myself into a corner and I have to really think hard to put the whole thing together and find a way, because you do get to that situation. Is he going to give up what he wants, or is she going to give up what she wants? And I'm very against her giving up what she wants. Or are we going to somehow find a coexistence, a compromise? So that's sort of the very rough framework. And I like to look at a character from lots of people's points of view. So, maybe if it's the hero, I want to look at him from the heroine's point of view primarily, but also maybe his parents, or one of his parents if he still has them, maybe his boss, maybe his brother, maybe his best friend, maybe an ex-girlfriend, because I believe we're different with every person. I never used to use much bad language in front of my mum, even though she was ex-army. Don't say crap. And, but with my brothers, there are no boundaries.
Different language,
yeah. So I think we're that little bit different with everybody, and so I like, if I look at them with a lot of important people, then I get this multifaceted character, and it's like what do you call it when you're acting? Method acting. That you think like the character. I'm not, I wouldn't, if I'm writing about a homeless person, go and sit in a doorway to do it, but like today, to go and sit at the building and think, now I know this character Inez a little, how would she have made this restaurant when she took it over from her parents? And will she live above, or would she like to live somewhere modern in that part of the city? No, I don't think so. I think she lives above. And it all just is, I say, it's just elaborate lines all over again.
It's a good quality if you're a writer. So, what themes do you see running through your books?
Yeah, I do like to know my themes as well. So, as just in case you haven't, well, no, you said you had read one of my books, but it's more than a romance. Everybody has their own story, but the romance is part of it. So they do have quite conflicts. You said you read One Summer in Italy, so obviously Sophia's big motivation was the promises to her father, going to Italy to try and fulfill them for him. But her themes of she's kind of detached from the life she's had, and it's been the life of a carer, really. So to find herself again in that different world.
There was a push-pull of, that's kind of who I am and who my heart is, but I really don't want to be there. And
and how do you reinvent yourself at that age? How do you find out who you are when all you've been is a carer, really, for the last few years? And Levi, I really like Levi. And I made his garage one in the town I was brought up in for several years when we left the army.
Oh, fun.
The guy called Bullet, he really did used to come out, run out if you walked across his forecourt. Get off my forecourt! So I put him in. He was a friend's dad, actually. So Levi was in a much better place, and his themes were more familial. Well, they were both, all of them were familial, I suppose, but quite often I write about recovery. I like people having fresh starts. And there are some quite tricky themes. Ursula in An Italian Island Summer, she has been the victim of drug assault, being roofied.
Ooh.
And that actually took place around the linked book, because she was the best friend. She was going through this aftermath with her husband. And what I found really interesting about people who were roofied was, well, there's a couple of things. One was, it's not always about sex, it's about power. And so a lot of people who are roofied are not actually assaulted they might be humiliated in some way, but it doesn't mean that they're going to be a victim of a rape. A lot are, but not all of them. And the other thing is the people around that person, the victim, for want of a better word, don't always react well or supportively,
Right.
because it's a huge shock. And nobody knows what happened. Was she sexually assaulted or was she not?
Yeah.
And she doesn't know. And this
Well,
guy brought her
you're in a
home.
drinking situation. If your drink's been drugged, you're in a
Yeah.
drinking situation, which gives people the opportunity to think all kinds of different thoughts about that.
Yeah.
So,
Is it your fault? Is it the victim's fault? Did she ask for it?
yeah.
Which is another of my, I see from your
Yeah.
face, you're saying one of my hobby horses, no, it's not the woman's fault for being roofied. It's the man's fault for roofing her. So, so that is, quite still uppermost in my mind.
Okay.
And the book that I've just been proofing, I've just sent the proof notes back today, is my next Christmas book. That just fell into my lap. I've never enjoyed writing a book more. I was at a writing conference last summer, and this lady said to me, I have these love letters and I want to give them to you. And I said, okay, I don't want those, but the thing was that she'd found them in her sister-in-law's, well, she and her husband had found them in his sister's effects when she died. They had known that she had an affair with a married man and that she'd never married herself. And she had carried this on until she died.
Wow.
In some way. I don't think they had actually met for some time, but they still telephoned. And there were all these letters. There's nearly 30 years worth of letters.
Wow.
And he
Wow.
remained married all this time, and they just didn't talk about his wife. And
Wow.
so she came and gave me these letters, and she said, my husband died a year ago today. And they are social history, but I don't want them. I didn't like
Yeah.
my sister. And some of them are, I don't know if you have this phrase in America, ripe, but they
Okay.
were and they were explicit. I'll tell you, it's embarrassing. I had to read them on my own. And so I took them because it was quite fascinating. I spent 2 days reading these letters, which took us up to, when was it? Early, 1993, I think. And she died in 2002, I think. So that period, either she binned all his letters or it was only the telephone, because they had begun telephoning much more. I guess mobile phones, cell phones were cheaper. And it was fascinating. It was
I bet.
absolutely fascinating. And he'd been an army sergeant. She'd been a civilian in the barracks. It's not a barracks, I know, but we were stationed there for a couple of years, and it was the Ministry of Defence, and it was my dad's regiment. But it
What?
was my dad.
Wow.
So I became really invested. And when I got to the end of the last letter, well, I want to be able to go onto Amazon and download the next
The rest of
installment.
the story, yeah.
And I couldn't. So I talked to the lady who'd given them to me. And she hadn't read much. She was hugely embarrassed by them.
Yeah.
And she hadn't read many. But she was saying things like, oh, I suppose it was, I won't tell you her name, my sister-in-law, who was chasing after him. I said, not at all. Not at all. Believe me, he got in trouble. I mean, it obviously came to light that he was seeing a single woman when he was married, and they worked in the same office. So he was posted to Scotland, to Aberdeen in Scotland. And this is from south, just west of London, southern England. So, that was in the 70s. So that was quite a long way, particularly with no cell phone coverage or anything like that.
And long distance calls were expensive.
Expensive. Yeah, and it's not something he could put on his home phone bill. He'd have had to go to the phone kiosk. So it's absolutely fascinating. So I gave this story to my heroine's great aunt, who she's the carer of. And I killed off the guy. unfortunately, for him, because I just couldn't work out how to bring him back in and still have Ruthie looking good, So and I made them make a baby together, which didn't happen in real
You're
life.
right.
I changed all the names, but it's called the Christmas Love Letters, and the
Okay.
theme of love letters runs throughout. And Ruthie, the great aunt, has very bad vision now, which is why she needs a carer. She's 80 now. And so Maddie, the heroine, reads them to her.
Ooh.
And she'll say, "Oh, stop there. He's going to get adult." And she goes, "Yeah, good. I'll stop there." She doesn't want to read those out. But I thought it was a nice illustration of what being a carer, being in that, it's a codependent relationship in a way, isn't it? Because
Mm-hmm.
If you are the person who needs care, you have to let somebody do things you don't really want. And if you're the carer, you have to do things for someone that you'd rather
That you don't
not.
really want. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I've had some feedback on it from my niece. She just proofread it for me, and she really liked it. So hopefully
Nice.
other people will as well. Yeah.
Awesome. So, how many books do you tend to write in a year?
Two. That's what I'm contracted for: a summer book and a winter book.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. And so you have and they both, it seems like they both are kind of travel escapism
No,
themes.
some of them are just in the UK,
Okay.
particularly the winter books. I
Okay.
have this village called Middle Dip, which is in Cambridgeshire, where um, just ridiculous sounding names seem common there, which is why it's got a slightly ridiculous name, which I never really expected to get published when I created it. But we used to take the children to the East Coast to the sea, and for holidays, we had a caravan and or a tent, and there was this stretch where it was before sat nav. It was just a straight road, and my map reading wasn't necessary. So I just sat with the map book and created two villages and a town. There's like a space. So
There's a perfect space for your made up town.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's somebody's farm, but that's where it is. And I never thought that I would write 10 books over two publishers. So a couple of those are partly in Middle Dip. One's partly in Middle Dip and partly in Sweden, and one's partly in Middle Dip and partly in Switzerland. And the reason they left the village was in both cases because a friend said, "If you want to come to X, you can come with me and stay with my mum or my husband or whatever, and I'll translate for you." Perfect.
Okay. That sounds good.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Um, so I was going to ask about your fictional towns that you create. And are they based on like a compilation of things, or are they all just kind of
They're just what I want, really. There's
okay?
little things like in Middle Dip, there's a place called the Cross, but it's not cross shaped. There's only three legs to it. But that comes from a village close to where I live in Northamptonshire. There are several in the UK places called Queen Eleanor Cross, and they were places where Queen Eleanor's body rested on the route to the final resting place. And I can't remember who her king was. Perhaps somebody with more historical knowledge will remember. But he caused to have raised a cross in each place.
Oh.
Well, Queen Eleanor Cross, where I am, has only got three Y-shaped, so I gave it that. Some of the names are from my mother-in-law's village. A couple are from my mother's village in Yorkshire from when she was a child. Some I just Winter Street, for a White Christmas in Winter Street, was just sounded like a good place for a Christmas book.
Absolutely.
Um, I wanted it to be called Christmas Street and have a white winter in Christmas Street, but my editor wanted to swap it round. So that's why I have a Winter
Okay.
Street rather than a Christmas Street. But it has a Christmas Street competition in it, one of these
Oh
competitions.
yeah.
All the houses put up as much blingy light as they can, and have a community project. So Yeah, so no, these things just, and my editor will sometimes say, well, can we have this? And, well, I'll need another street. And so I have to sort of put white paper on my master copy and draw in or reroute the stream or something. Yeah. And then I have to rephotograph it and send it to my web guy who has to add it onto the
Add it
master.
in, yeah. Add some more houses in and
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Every time I write something in Middle Dip, he has to locate it on the map
update.
and
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. It's
that's funny
a wild existence, isn't it? Being an
for
author.
sure. Yeah, that's a pretty cool thing to have and to have created. I like that.
It's fun.
That's, yeah, that's really neat. You commented on this earlier. One of my questions was, do you have series or connected books? And it sounds like the winter ones are all
Yeah, it's always been done on whim before. So a lot of books have been set in Middle Dip because readers ask for them. And they say, oh, is it a Middle Dip book? And they like to occasionally see that the shop has changed hands, or there's this old character called Gabe, that he's still around. There's a pony that's about 105 because I daren't kill it off because readers won't like it. Um, and then I have I set one in a Norfolk village. Norfolk is an eastern county in
okay.
England, which is another place I like to go. So that was like, where do I want to go? I'll go there. And the winter book I've just written is like a companion for that. It's the same village, but none of the same
None of the same
characters.
characters. Okay.
And then the not the book you've just read, One Summer in Italy, that has kind of a companion book, Under the Italian Sun, which is set in the same place but doesn't have the same characters.
Okay.
And then An Italian Island Summer is linked to that because you see the heroine again now. She's all loved up and pregnant, and the heroine of this book is the best friend of that book.
Right.
So
Right.
you see these links, but
Okay.
not everybody gets them. They don't
Okay.
realize. Some of them are linked more firmly than others. But having said that, my editor now wants me to be a little more
Intentional.
yes, intentional. Great word. So we're planning the whole next three books. So
That's
summer
pretty
20.
exciting. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, it's about three sisters who were adopted, and so they each get a book. And Thea comes to Quimper, where I am now, surprisingly enough, to find her mother. And she finds out that her name is not what she thought it was, and she had a different surname, and her mother went to prison, and oh, it's quite exciting.
So I was going to ask about the book, but you may not be ready to ask about it, but do the sisters know that they were adopted?
Yes, and they were
Okay.
very happily adopted. They were
Okay.
very happily adopted by two musicians called
Oh,
Maxie and Vince. They were sort of session musicians and backing singers, that kind of,
yeah.
not superstars.
Right.
Uh, so, because that would be quite difficult to write about, I think. Well, I have kind of written about it before, but I've got a friend who's a singer, so that's very, very helpful. I'm shameless with research. I'll ask anybody who I think can help me. Will you help me? And they almost always do.
I would think that would be interesting for people to be able to talk about what they do, knowing that
Usually,
it's helping you do what you do. So,
usually they are interested rather
yeah.
than difficult. Occasionally people don't want, but that's fine. I'm not going to pay them or anything except with a signed book. So
Yeah.
I may have forgotten what your original question was there. Sorry.
That's okay. I did too. So it was about the connected books. So that's fine.
Oh, right, okay, I think I've covered it. Yeah.
Get off on tangents. And so you're working on the Three Sisters series
Yeah.
right now. Is one
Yeah.
of those going to be a holiday book, or are you going to take a break and
Note that when you say holiday, you see, when you say holiday and when I say holiday, it may not be the same because you may
right,
be Thanksgiving and Christmas and I'm saying summer.
right. So let me change that. Is one of them going to be your winter book?
Yes.
Okay.
So I've started with the youngest sister, Thea. All the sisters have got really long names, and they were always told that that was to prove how much their adoptive parents wanted them.
Oh, that's so
Um,
cute.
so Fia's name is actually Alfiadora, but she's found out now that it was actually a French name, Altea, and then hyphen, and then Dora. And they sort of made her like her sisters, because her sisters were adopted through an agency as babies, but she wasn't adopted till she was 15 months old, which she's only just discovered.
Ooh.
So the other sisters, Esmeralda and Valentina. So Esmeralda will be the next one, but she's always Ezzy.
Okay.
So she's the middle sister, and she'll be the winter one. And
Okay.
that will stay on the Isle of Skye. That's not going to another country.
Nice.
And Valentina, the oldest, more serious sister, who is a lawyer, although she's in with a small chance of being made a police officer. It depends which one works best for the plot. She's going to come to the village. She doesn't live there at the moment. She lives
The
with,
French
she's
village or
no,
just Sky?
the village on the Isle
Okay.
of Skye. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So at the
Okay.
moment, she's living somewhere like London or Birmingham. I haven't quite made up my mind. Somewhere where she's
Okay.
in a big corporate. She's in the legal department of a corporation, and she's got a very legal husband, and she's going to get rid of him.
Very proper
And
life.
yeah, she's going to run away from that life and him. I think he's going to really disgrace himself. I'm saving up things for him.
Ooh.
And she's going to come and live on the Isle of Skye with her sisters
To escape all of the trauma from.
to escape. And they went there to escape. They lived in England with another southeastern county, Suffolk. And they created a big lie there, one to protect the other. And when it got a
Wow.
bit uncomfortable, they ran off and got a job in this hall, which is part of this village on the Isle of Skye. So one of them is the head gardener and the other one is the assistant manager. So
Interesting.
yeah,
Okay.
I love creating halls and villages and what have
That's
you.
so fun. I like it.
I have a little scruffy pad with me that's kind of got little bits, and so that's got the village on the Isle of Skye. You see,
Oh,
so
fun.
that's very, very scruffy. But when I've decided more about it, I will put it on an A3 sheet, and it will be done in pencil, so so
Fun.
I can touch things without just scribbling.
I was
But
thinking the other day about because I love maps and I love like when a book has a map in it. I think that's
yeah.
like the best. And especially if it's like a watercolor map, that's like magical.
Oh wow, I
I've
want
always
one.
thought it would be so fun to like be able to do that, to be able to
Yeah.
watch and it
Oh
probably
yeah.
isn't a ton, you know,
Was
but
they are right. I see somebody, Nicole's just asked where they can find the maps. It's www.suemoorcroft.com. And if you go to the writing tab, you can find like
okay,
Middleditch books and the maps and
fun.
stuff. So you should be able to find them there. There's one of Nelson's Bar as well, the Norfolk Village. I don't think I ever got on with putting the Italian village on there, Monte Libertà.
I like the visuals of going down into town and the pink
Yeah,
hotel.
yeah,
And that's
yeah,
I could
yeah,
picture it in my mind pretty well. So I appreciated that.
yeah. I really liked, I do find it easy to put myself in my mind during the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic. I don't know how severe your lockdown was, but ours was pretty severe. And the first summer, we had a really hot summer for the UK.
Oof.
And I just sat in the garden writing about Italy, pretending I was there. And
Yeah.
it wasn't as bad. Okay, I couldn't go to the gym or see my friends or see my son and
Ugh,
daughter-in-law for that matter. But I could be in Italy in my head.
that's a good place to be, huh? So what is coming out next? You have a lot of books in the pipeline,
Depends which
so
country you're in. This summer in the UK is an Italian island summer. In Canada is summer on a sunny island. US, you haven't got a book this year. We're just rejiggling. Sorry.
okay.
We were trying to catch you up with Canada, so all North America was together. But now this trilogy idea has come up. We're thinking again about that. So, yeah, so I don't know what's going to happen there. I think Germany's got Germany's got summer at the French Cafe, and so has Denmark. And Italy has got, oh, I can't remember. I'm sorry.
That's okay, but we don't get anything. That's what I'm hearing.
No, I'm really sorry. You normally get it at the same time as the UK, but you can
We'll
get the
just wait.
paperback. You can get the paperback as a third party from a third party seller
Okay.
in the US.
We'll keep an eye out for that
You
then. That
can't get
sounds
the
good.
ebook. Yeah, because Canada's 5 books behind because of differences in contracts. I came up with this brilliant idea because the US likes Canadian covers better than it likes UK covers, and that was really obvious in the ebook figures,
Oh,
sales figures.
interesting. Okay.
Very, very obvious. So this was my idea. Well, let's put the US on hiatus for 5 books until they catch up, and then you can have the North American cover right from the start. So that was the plan.
Ah.
Now my editors come up with this and once it's set in Scotland to appeal to US readers. And I said, well, hang on. by the time 3 years is up, US readers may not be keen on men in kilts anymore. It may be, Welsh men in Wellington in rubber boots or something. So she said, yeah, we need to talk about this. I'll talk to my US colleagues. So I
Okay.
think maybe there's going to be I don't know how it
Well,
works.
Outlander's still pretty hot, so
Yes.
I imagine kilts are still in for the moment. So
yeah, my hero is now Scots. I haven't put him in a kilt yet. I don't know. The UK market is not quite so enamored of kilts. I mean, where I
yeah.
live, there's a town where although I live in the middle of England, very much in the middle, there's a town where lots of Scots and Irish moved in the 50s, what was called a new town. And they moved all kinds of industry there and just took overspill from big cities and said, there you are, you can live there. And so sometimes if you go to a wedding or something, there's a lot of men in kilts. And if they're not very young and they're not very thin and they sit opposite you, it's not always good. Really not.
That paints an ugly picture. All righty then. When I picture man in kilt, that's not what I'm picturing.
Exactly. So you could, it's like women in short skirts, isn't it? Sometimes it's fantastic.
Sometimes it's lovely and sometimes more than you need.
Yeah,
That's the way it rolls.
I'm definitely past short skirts, and I'm
I'm
sure
with you
everybody's
there.
grateful.
Well, Sue, this has been delightful. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. I've
Oh,
enjoyed
thank
it.
you for inviting me. It's been great fun. I'm going to go to the cafe outside and have a couple of glasses of wine with my Kindle now.
Well, that sounds lovely. And it sounds like we over here have 5 years to catch up on all the backgrounds. So.
Thanks for joining me today on the Literary Escape podcast. If you enjoy hearing the behind the book story, then join me in the Literary Escape Society. We're a community of travelers who love books, or maybe book lovers who love to travel. Either way, if you need an escape, a literary escape, come join us as we read our way around the world together, one book at a time. Check out the show notes to learn more about the Literary Escape Society. And we'll see you next time on the next episode.